Good morning. Welcome back to Morning at 10 TV, and this is a solution segment. Today we are big on the discussion of sexual violence, gender-based sexual violence. So that's the discussion we'll be having today. 18 to 19% of women and 8% of men disclose their experiences on sexual harassment, sexual violence. Now, what happens to the other percentage, the bigger percentage that doesn't come out to, disclose this particular vice? So that's the discussion we'll be having today. What are the solutions moving forward? What can be done to fight this particular vice? And in studios to talk about that is Mercy Munduru, who is from FIDA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Diana Kagere Mugerwa. Thank you so much for joining us. You are from CEDOVIP, which is the Center for Domestic Violence Prevention. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you so much, Mala.
We will get to this particular enactment of the sexual offences bill that you're trying to push for Parliament to enact. But let's start with getting the terms right, because when it comes to sexual violence and this particular vice, there are other aspects to it. There's sexual harassment, there's sexual abuse, there's all this, even this child abuse. So maybe we can start off. What is sexual violence? Diana, you can take that.
Thank you so much, Mala. Sexual violence broadly, just as you've mentioned, encompasses quite a number of abuses. In terms of physical, we have the physical, we have other emotional offenses of violence. When you look at our sexual offences bill, we look to broadly enlarge the definition of sexual violence as currently is in our laws beyond just the sexual abuse, that is rape and defilement. So we have several other offenses under this. We have sexual harassment that might be verbal, it might be online, what we call cyber harassment.
Right.
Then we also have other forms that could be in other ways in terms of intimidation or coercing, and those are the different forms that we kind of have in sexual harassment. Then we also have all other sexual violence offenses related to children. I've mentioned defilement, issues of incest, child pornography, or ensuring that you practice sexual acts in front of the children. So this bill tries to broaden the definitions of sexual violence so that we encompass several issues. Then we have sexual violence occurring within intimate partner relationships.
In marriages?
And in marriages. So what we call marital rape is just another form that this bill is also trying to cover. Currently, our sexual violence is only covering the two forms, that's defilement and rape. So we wanted to make sure that we have a bill that expounds all these other forms and also taking into account the new forms like stalking, which is...
Stalking as well?
Yes, it is a form of sexual violence. So you also have aspects where because it affects someone's dignity and privacy. So all those forms we want to make sure that they are covered and they are also comprehensively taken care of in the new law, which is absent in the laws that are currently available. Like
and that's why we're seeing, currently actually sexual violence being humanized and being taken as a casual thing. You go to the police to report and it's not taken as a serious offense. Madam Munduru, you are at the forefront of pushing this particular bill, and she actually, broke it down for us and what it entails. Why has it taken so long for the Parliament to take it as a serious issue and actually push for its enactment? What do you think?
Just looking at how the laws on women are, when we talk about gender discrimination, I must say that it cuts across different institutions, and you will see in terms of priority, the way laws are prioritized in our Parliament is very disappointing. If you look at the crime incident reports, for example, of police, you'll realize that sexual violence or gender-based violence broadly is still among the top ranking crimes in the country.
Right.
And that means that the issues around sexual and gender-based violence are very urgent. However, most times when you put a law in Parliament that touches on issues that are actually happening and being perpetrated by the same people who are supposed to advance these issues, they will pretty much ignore it. It's not an issue of priority. I mean, this bill came for the first reading and now it's at the committee stage, but it's been there for so long.
Right.
And yet every day as you go over the internet, when you watch the news every day, there is a case of sexual violence. There is a case of gender-based violence. There are new trends that are coming and taking root in our society, and not just affecting the older women, but now it is even going down to the younger generation at the universities, at schools. Some of the practices that have been happening before that people have been silent about are now starting to be talked about.
Yeah.
So I ask myself then, why wouldn't Parliament prioritize this? Why don't we have the certificate of financial implications so that this law is fast-tracked and we have a mechanism in place at least to protect, you know, against some of the offenses that have not yet taken care of in our current and existing laws. So I really think that it goes down to, one, patriarchy, two, attitudes, the attitudes that people have, you know, on issues like this. So people are not comfortable talking about marital rape, yet it's happening.
Right.
People are not comfortable talking about sexual harassment, yet a section of female MPs were saying they're being harassed by their colleagues in Parliament. So what if they're talking about it, that means it's entrenched, and these people are not willing to, you know, pass a law that is going to anyway be enforced against them too.
It's actually happening on a day-to-day basis, and just the other day we saw it affect a member of parliament, Sylvia Robogo, who we had this young man, Brian Isiko, you know, sentenced to, you know, 2 years in prison. And this was just after it was made easy because Brian Isiko actually came out to plead guilty.
Exactly.
Now my question would be, had he pleaded innocent, what would have happened? You that sits on, you know, law fronts, what would have happened in that case now that we don't have, you know, a sexual, you know, law, sexual offences law that, you know, is deeply entrenched on what that entails? Like you're saying, it's just pretty much a basic one. What would have happened?
Well, Mala, to answer your question, what would have happened? Probably the chances of her actually securing a conviction would have been lowered. It's one of the challenges that we're grappling with. The justice system, judiciary is actually clogged with so many pending cases of sexual violence and of course also related to gender-based violence because of the nature of these offenses. They are perpetrated by people close to the person. These are relatives, these are intimate partners, and then strangely also we have those that are perpetrated by strangers. Let's say you're being held at the streets.
Right.
By the time you walk to a police station to lodge a complaint, you actually can't remember the face of the perpetrator and you can't identify him. Now, within the system, when you're lucky and your case gets through the court system, the nature of the burden of proof, right, that's our law system, is upon you to make sure that you actually prove beyond reasonable doubt. And beyond reasonable doubt means that you have to have lots of evidential requirements that are being listed for survivors. If you go through the trial and you're lucky, you're unlucky that the perpetrator doesn't plead guilty, you actually have to go through the examination.
Wow.
And you have to recount this event. Let's say it's rape. You know, you have to recount these events through court, through the processes, and then you're cross-examined, right? With the usually the defense lawyers are so savage that they'll ask questions that will even put you off balance as a victim, or even feel like you even doubt your own self, or even doubt your statement. The other challenge that we have is the length that these cases take within the system. You find that the minimum is 2 years for a case to go through the justice system. I mean, you're raped at 16, 2 years later, someone wants you to remember an event that happened to you 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, exactly as it happened. Should you have a difference from what you signed as the affidavit or the statement that you made at the police station, then they will have questions in your statement. Oh, she's lying, she's inconsistent, and that's what will be based on. Those technicalities is what will be based on for you to get a conviction. Now, in terms of sexual violence, lots of evidence issues. The nature of storage, right? you have to have, they tell you, oh, don't shower, keep your pieces of clothes.
Yeah.
But when you reach a police station, they don't actually have a space where they can actually keep this evidence, so that is intact by the time of the trial, which is going to be about 2 or 3 years from now.
Are there gaps that are also, you know, included in this particular bill that you're trying to push for?
Yes.
Mercy?
Yes. Yes. That is why, for me, this bill is very important, because first of all, it is a consolidation of all the sexual offences. So it's looking at even the already existing laws where there have been provisions, and also it takes care of the key issues that Diana is raising. One is the new trends, including sexual harassment by employers, sexual harassment in other spaces as well, issues around child pornography, issues around marital rape that are not taken care of currently, but even rape, which we already have in our law, but of course it's not gender neutral. Currently it just has women, but then the bill expounds to also include men, which is very, very important if you ask me. And then other issues around prostitution, especially considering now the issues of sexual exploitation with the trafficking that's happening in the country. So the law also provides for, you know, procedural guidelines for the first time in our law. They're able to take care of the uniqueness of how sexual violence manifests itself. It's very traumatic, and every time you know, a survivor has to appear in court, there has to be certain procedural elements that are encompassed in our law to guide our judicial officers in how to handle these cases without re-victimizing, you know, the survivors. So this law is very important in the fact that it doesn't only provide for the law for the sexual, for other forms of sexual violence, but also gives that kind of guidance, even in terms of evidence. You know, usually
especially
you have
evidence
to
now that
corroborate.
it's hard to even, you know, prove that you've been raped or harassed or, you know, molested, especially for children. So I think it's quite biased. So now that it's providing for that ease, it's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. Much as we know that, of course, we have challenges around enforcement, but also that's partly the reason why we're pushing the judiciary to have a special court or a special division, so that, you know, not only do we have a progressive law, but we're also making changes in the system. For a long time, we've been shouting about laws, you know, and all of that, but we have quite a number of laws, but they're still not being enforced because we're fighting for space with governance or political related crimes. We're fighting for space with issues around kidnap, elections, and whatever. So there's really not enough space for all of us. So if we have a special arrangement within the court or within the judiciary, we'll be able to progressively have our cases heard, and then all of these special procedures are taken care of, but also it will encourage reporting.
It encourage reporting, and still on reporting, we only have a very small percentage of people who undergo sexual violence coming out to report it. Actually, statistics in Uganda show that over 90% of women have at some point in their lives been harassed sexually, either through violence or whatever form. And just a small percentage of that, 18 to 19% of that, that's women. And only 8% of men come out to speak about it. Then what happens to, you know, the other big percentage that is about 80 and above? So like you're saying, the procedures are key, just to encourage people to come out there and report. So what happens to the others? Because I know in society, me and you, we all have a role to play in trying to help out victims of sexual violence. So what are these signs that we always need to look out for? Maybe in our children, in our friends, in our families and relatives, to just know that, you know what, Madam Mercy is being abused sexually. What should we look out for?
Thank you, Mala. Some of the signs, some are visible. This child could come and they are talking about pain in their private areas, or they start acting out. For children, basically, they start acting out the different acts if they get in touch with another child. So it's important for the parent to keenly watch their children's character, or how they are playing, what kind of games they are playing, and they'll actually talk about the things. So it's good for you to listen in their baby language, let's even say. It's also for adults. someone loses their self-esteem out of the blue, then I saw Jolie, and then she's withdrawn because she feels like everyone knows what happened to me. You kind of feel like, let me say the word dirty, right? You feel used, you feel wasted. So they kind of withdraw from community or their usual activities. Others are depression. We have those that are really angry, like someone is just really so angry that even any slight mention of anything related around sexual violence, they will actually have outbursts. So those are some of the other signs. But also there are some others who are really good at covering up these offenses.
Exactly,
that you
they
can
even
never
come
know
out to
unless they
justify
speak
their
out.
acts.
And that is where sexual violence issues, sexual harassment, for example. You know, for sexual violence, perhaps there are those obvious signs, but sexual harassment can go on for so long without you even noticing. And for students and pupils, you realize that perhaps a child does not perform very well at school, their performance maybe declines, or they do not like to go to school anymore, or they avoid certain people, you know. And I feel specifically we need to focus on the learning institutions. Recently we went to a secondary school in Luero to talk to students, you know, about issues around human rights, gender, and one of the boys came to me at the back of the class and said, you know, this teacher so-and-so who has been touching girls on their bums. And I told him, did you report to anybody? He said, no, because I fear. And I said, no, it's good you noticed it, then you need to report. So we had to get a person within the institution who we spoke to, and I'm happy to say that the teacher was suspended. But you see, it was a boy who reported.
Is it just suspension or fired? Should have been
well,
fired.
they said he's been suspended indefinitely. We're
For
yet to see.
investigations.
Yes. So, but I was impressed by the fact that, you know, after talking to students, they were able to now start to notice that this is wrong. I cannot, such a boy will not touch a girl inappropriately, because now he knows. He even saw somebody do it and reported. So how many more students do we have going through this? At universities, I watch on TV, I speak to young people at universities who say, you know, I get 2%. Of course, your parent will not know why you got 2%. They think probably you're not focusing in class, or you're not reading, or you're just playing at university. Yet there is a lecturer who wants to sleep with you and you've said no, and he decides, I'm going to give you 2%.
Actually, you mentioned that, and it's brought me back to the report, the sexual violence report that was released by Makerere University, saying that 50% of female students and 40% of male students there have experienced sexual violence in one form or the other.
Exactly. So that goes to show how serious it is. And this has been going on for so long. I'm only happy that now people are happy to talk about it. And that is why I also give credit to you, the press, because the more you talk about these issues, the more you encourage people to report, because then people get to understand, I can actually talk about this. I mean, the press can actually protect my identity as they tell my story. And that means that many other people are going to start to talk. They will know where services are, and they will know what policies and laws are in place.
Let me ask you, the procedure of actually reporting these particular cases, it's been tedious. You go to a police station, they really don't understand it. They even tell you, why were you dressed like that? And we all know it's not about the style of dress. It's about the perpetrator. So as you push for this, you know, sexual offense bill, will it also entrench the aspect of training the police on how to handle such cases, and just to preserve evidence, because there's that as well? Madam Diana.
Thank you. The trainings are already ongoing. The capacity building is already ongoing for the institutions. Maybe now what we need is to scale up to cover at least all, let's say, police officers. Make it mandatory for all duty bearers, not only the police, but all duty bearers, including the police, prosecution, judicial officers, to have knowledge and skills on how to handle violence against women and girls cases, because they are very peculiar, and they are very unique cases that need a different kind of skill set for these duty bearers, away from their normalized skills that they need to handle these cases, even in terms of investigations. So we actually realized that in terms of budgetary allocations for government, priorities are elsewhere, right? You look at the police, the budget is more focused on other areas. When you look at the Child and Family Protection Department budget, it's really very minimal, and it's placed somewhere around other activities around community mobilization and all that. Yet this is the department, and the sexual offences department under CID that is mandated with the biggest job in this country of making everyone safe. So it really is puzzling. So we really need to ensure that government prioritizes these issues, puts the right resources, and ensure that actually the institutions are training and giving skills and knowledge to the duty bearers to ensure that they respond to the problem appropriately. That way you would see that you actually have more justice. Because just as you mentioned, when you look at the conviction rates for sexual violence cases, is at only 15%.
They're very low.
76% are pending in the system, right? And of course, 7,222 cases up to date are still under investigations, and these offenses that didn't happen yesterday, but they happened somewhere in 2015.
Yes.
These are like 3 years back, but the file is still pending, and you keep following up on the matter, and they tell you investigations are still going on, the case is brought to court, investigations are going on, and you're just tired of hearing that story. So imagine how the survivor feels. They want to move on in their lives with this issue. Well, probably they've gotten a new partner, or they want to move on with their lives, but you're still stuck with this case for 3 years, and they are telling you investigations are still going on.
And I think no wonder many people actually shy away from reporting, but I need you to enlighten us on this. We have women and also men being harassed in their workspaces, especially careers that put you in a vulnerable situation. Maybe, you know, women who work in massage parlors, you know, compromising situations. We had a report just the other day saying that many women working in massage parlors are normally, you know, coerced into sexual acts by their clients, and if you do not oblige, then you are actually threatened. So in such spaces, even in offices, white-collar jobs, you know, women and even men are actually, you know, coerced and told, you know what, if you don't engage in this, I will fire you. Threats, you know, abuse of power, this culture of impunity. So if it actually happens, or it's happening to someone watching us today, what's the procedure? What procedure should they use to actually report and just gain justice at the end of the day without having to go through the court procedure?
Yeah, I think most importantly, first of all, at every workspace, you should have the zero tolerance policy. In most of the upscale organizations and companies, you realize that one of the first policies that you come across is that one against sexual harassment. So every entity, formal or informal, should have some sort of documentation around how that, first of all, that we don't tolerate this, and when it happens, this is what the penalties are, or this is what the procedure is supposed to be. So even within your human resource policy, you have to entrench these key elements, because it could affect anybody, a man or a woman.
Right.
Once people know that we have a policy like this in place, and if I violate, I'm likely to lose my job, it will be deterrent for them, and they will be able to pull back from certain acts. But imagine working in a space where you don't have any policies that are protecting you. I'll give you an example. I work for a gender equality institution. And so when I have a baby, they will take into consideration certain special treatments. There are certain things that I will not do until, you know, the baby is perhaps older. So everybody knows that if they don't do that for me, that's also a violation of my right as a worker. So that should be the same with sexual harassment. So it starts there. And then places like brothels and also massage parlors, I'm sorry to say, that is where exploitation happens. Sometimes the owners of these places collude with their customers to come and sexually harass these girls. They force them into prostitution. If you speak to most of these girls, they act out of their will sometimes, because the owner of this place gets customers by virtue of the fact that they're going to be entitled to free sex at the end of the massage. So we need to look very, very deliberately into these newly emerging forms of sexual exploitation. I call it sexual exploitation because I know that it is a job for this girl, but at the end of the day, she has to do something extra, and then she's going to be paid for just one thing. So that is how it should start. But also, we need to, as duty bearers, including us in civil society, train more people in different spaces who are going to be like paralegals or community legal volunteers who are able to, you know, help somebody at the first instance and perhaps follow up this case on their behalf.
Okay.
For example, if somebody comes to FIDA to report a sexual violence case, I can choose as a lawyer to be the one to go and open a file at police. And that means that I don't have to put the victim in that space.
Yeah.
Recently, I was handling a case of a 14-year-old, and the police said, no, she has to come and report. I said, no.
It's a
Right now,
14-year-old.
I've already reported.
Yes.
She is psychologically tortured.
Right.
So let her get counseling. She will speak when she's comfortable too. Because right now, even if she speaks, she may not speak everything because she's traumatized. So those kinds of things.
So
that is where our role
Yeah.
as duty bearers comes.
Yeah.
So we need to train more people in different spaces who are able to be at the forefront if we don't want to. If we feel like people reporting these cases is a challenge, then let there be people who can help them.
So there's actually that aspect of, you know, training people who can be approached, maybe rescue centers
Exactly.
in every county, in every region.
Even
Okay.
at universities, like fellow students or particular people from the students' departments, you should have students who are like volunteers.
Yes.
So they take up cases on behalf of, you know, fellow students. They're able to go to a director and report on behalf of a student who is afraid to speak. They can go to police. They can call FIDA for this person. Those kinds of people will be more approachable than us, the duty bearers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to, because I know it will take time before we have such people in
Yes.
place and such, you know, structures in place. As at now, over and above approaching FIDA, are there other, you know, structures or NGOs that support people who have been victims of sexual violence, Diana?
Yes. Away from police, we also have organizations that are supporting survivors of violence, and also the health facilities. Like our existing laws, like the Domestic Violence Act, one, it mandates third parties to report on behalf of the victims. So even when you know that Mercy, let's say for example, is being sexually harassed or she's experiencing sexual violence, it's your responsibility to report on behalf of Mercy.
Okay.
Whether she wants to push this case further
Or not?
or not. So it's up to Mercy to decide how that goes. But also we want to implore that the duty bearers, that if Mercy reports, even if she's not interested in pursuing this case, can this case continue on behalf of Mercy? Because this is a criminal offense we are talking about. It's an offense against the state. So we want to ensure that whether Mercy wants to be a witness in this case or she doesn't, we want this case to continue.
Okay.
So the health facilities are also a good point to report, especially for sexual violence when it has happened. It's important that you report to a health facility within 3 days when the event has happened, because one, on top of them recording for you the medical report that will be used as evidence in courts of law or when you go to police to report this criminal case, they also provide medical interventions that can save other adverse effects that can come out of this this incident. For example, you'll be given post-exposure prophylaxis, which will help you to prevent pregnancy as a result of that sexual assault. It will also help you to avoid contraction of STDs and HIV/AIDS. So it's important that you report to a health facility as fast as possible.
Okay.
And that health worker is then supposed to take you to the next point of reference. But also other organizations like FIDA, Center for Domestic Violence Prevention, and so many others that are providing services in terms of psychosocial support, shelter, legal aid, are very open to receive these cases and support the survivors to ensure that they get justice.
Thank you so much, ladies, for coming on the show. Thank you so much for giving us insight and a little bit of solutions on how to go about it. So in case you're a victim, now you know where to go. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion. My name is Malaki Vilaodera. Morning at 10 TV still continues. Up next is Take Note.